Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. I'm the Series Strategy Game and we're returning to Let's Play of War in the West. So, we've broken through the German lines here in northern Italy and we've pretty much captured Verona, but also made a dash here towards the coast along the port of Chioggia, close to Venice. So, we have encircled a couple of Germans here. Well, not quite encircled. They can still communicate with their main lines. But it's a very narrow corridor that they've got over here. It's now the German turn, so let's see what they're going to do. In between episodes, I just moved up a couple of units. Some units over here, some over there. I do think we actually have a tank over here that is that we got a Free French armored division. We're going to send that to England so it can participate in the invasion of France, which I think is going to be fantastic. We're also starting to build up some serious preparation here for that invasion. But for now, let's see how the Germans are going to react over here. As you can see, our defensive lines are a little bit spotty. We do basically extend all the way over here, but this is only a small Italian group, which is actually going to withdraw next turn. We've got a brigade group over here, so these guys don't necessarily have all the staying power in the world that we'd just like them to have. Similar things over here with the armored brigade. These are all good units, don't get me wrong, but you can see there are gaps all over the place. So let's see what the Germans are going to do. I did want to show you that to you and experience that with you, because this is a little bit tenuous, this position that we've got over here. I mean, it's very nice that we did manage to push through to Lake Garda, but what are the Germans going to do? This is sort of a situation where I think we might have been a little bit too aggressive. I do want to be aggressive. I want to push the Germans hard on that front, but I don't know what's going to happen. So I'm quite intrigued. Here we go then. So they're going to recombine all of the infantry units, and then let's see. Notice that these guys here down here have very low supply. Very low supply level. Okay, so it appears they did not try to attack, but it seems like they're trying to get out of this pocket, which is a wise choice for them. But let's see whether they're going to make it out of there, actually. I think they might well. Oh, look at them. They are withdrawing further units there. I didn't see what the AI did there sort of as the last thing in their turn. But let's see what we've got over here then. Right, so, well, firstly it seems like the weather is still rainy. There's still a bit of mud. In some of these areas there's actually heavy mud, which is of course not great for us. Okay, that's curious. So on this flank here, we've got the part of the Fallschirmjäger division, bit of the Panzer Grenadiers, that infantry division. So I think two divisions here. One, the 3rd Panzer Grenadier division. No, these are parts of different divisions, but basically a full Panzer Grenadier division, a full infantry division, some Fallschirmjägers, a couple of Jägers, and the 26th Panzer division, or part of it at least. And I do think we'll be able to capture these guys here just by capturing Chioggia, which should be pretty easy actually, so that's very nice to see. Mostly light mott over here. Some further defensive line here with some Jägers, probably the rest. No, this is just the reserve Panzer Division. Wow. Wow. Okay, so there guys, that did leave me a little bit stunned. Look at that, the Germans have withdrawn pretty much most of their units here that they had in sort of the Lombardy region towards the Alps here, and it seems like they are building a couple of Jäger and infantry divisions here, or are setting them up to prepare for a stance here, sort of along this shortest line from Venice to the Dolomites up to the Swiss border here. So that's utterly fascinating. I don't think I've ever seen that. Oh, there's Schmalz Panzer Grenadier Division. That is super interesting. And they have completely forsaken Lombardy and Piedmont. That's just a small part of an infantry division here, bit here. The rest is just security detachments. That is amazing. We have pretty much... I mean, Genoa does look pretty well defended still. I mean, at 28, that's nothing to be... Yeah, that's level 3 fortifications and urban terrain. But, man... Everything until Venice is probably open. Toulon might be the first obstacle here. That does mean, my friends, it's probably completely irrelevant to do the Dragoon landings. So Operation Dragoon just trying to land in southern France to basically, so the idea there would be to capture the ports of Toulon and Marseille. So that is a level 9 port, which is going to be great. And you basically have two rail lines, one running along this river line, one running along these mountains, pretty much until Lyon, and then all the way towards the southern German border here. So that is a very good supply line from Marseille towards Lyon. And historically, for this reason, the Allies did land down here and conduct some naval amphibious landings, but we don't need to do that if the Germans are just going to forsake this area here. So that's huge. So of course what we're going to try to do is grab that area and make sure to get that. I mean, they can't attack from here because again there's no rail line here. So basically as soon as we are establishing ourselves down here, they basically don't have any chance of pushing through here. We just need very small defenses. And actually, since we didn't know that we were going to expand here in terms of front line, I did bring 2 units up from Europe. That is the 156 Separate US Infantry Regiment, simply because these guys are good at holding ground, or so I believe. And we've got the Special Service Brigade here. Again, just a small unit. These guys are not gonna be good at frontal assault or anything. But just 2 of them might just even hold out over here. And even if we are pushing into the Pennine Alps down here, I think we basically only have to worry. Notice there's no rail connection here. There's no rail connection basically through here. So basically if we can hold on to Turin, I don't think they have a good avenue for attack. So that would be fantastic. By the way, let's look at the railheads here. So basically they don't have that much. Wow, that's super interesting. They don't even have rail yards over here anywhere. Yeah, even Grenoble. Yeah, Grenoble would have a rail yard, but other than that, they would have to source supplies basically from the Rhone Valley here. So nice. That is very nice. Amazing. Sorry guys, I'm still stunned by that development. But yeah. So what we're going to have to do then is, I think we're going to try to capture these guys here in this little pocket. Basically close that off. They should suffer from no supplies just right after that. And I do think that we probably want to capture Venice as soon as possible, simply because the port here is going to be extremely helpful for our purposes. Of course, what do they have here to defend this? Part of an infantry division. Of course, that's understandable. It's a city hex, so that is quite interesting. Honestly, all of these other guys, though, are not that great at defending. And they're not really well set up, so that's nice. And I do think we are starting to build, well, both the airbase here, but most importantly the rail yard is being improved here at Verona, so that's good to see. Yeah, and we'll be able to get into France probably way before I anticipated. This is April 1944. Historically, this is pretty much the time when they were still stuck in fighting on Monte Cassino and with the Anzio landing, so very famously frustrating times for the Allies historically in Italy, and we are just blowing them out of the water here. Fantastic. Okay, so you know what? In a slight departure from what I'm usually doing, I just want to show you a little bit the setup that I do for the air phase every time. Usually I do that in between episodes, but we're starting out here by setting every group here to be ready during day and night, simply so that these guys are all active. What we're going to do then is say every unit that has fatigue above 20, so all of these guys here are going to go on a rest mission. And we're going to clear these filters and pretty much take any unit that has less than 60 morale. And that's pretty much most of them usually. And we're also going to ask these guys here to rest. So simply making sure that everyone who's been overly taxed in the last couple of turns is doing fine. Then we're going to check the weather, see whether any actions are going to be impossible. It seems like there's a lot of rain and some snowfall. Is that cold, or is that just is that snowfall or cold? I don't know. But it seems like most missions are going to be possible, and that's actually only cold, which is better, I believe, than rain. So that's nice. Pretty much most of our strategic air forces are going to be able to fly. So let's check out what the Germans have in terms of our priority targets. So we're going to go look at enemy locations here, industry, and we're going to start by looking at synthetic fuel. Basically check out whether any of the biggest things here have a damage level of less than 50, and it seems like most of these guys are fine. Only Strats here has a damage level that I would be slightly concerned about. But pretty much everything else here is fine. Where exactly is Ruland? It's over here. Well, yeah, that's an awkward target. It's deep in enemy terrain. It's probably very heavily defended. Yeah, you can see just 280 regiments of flak over here. So yeah, that's just too much. Yeah, that's just too much. And it's close to the area that we were bombing anyway last time around. And it does seem like the Germans are reinforcing this area. Just notice how many units are now stationed around Berlin. A lot of these guys are not necessarily fighters, but still it's a lot of units. Okay, so yeah, primary target system, that's fine. We don't need to target any of the synthetic fuel refineries here. I think so, most of that is fine. We could target the Ruhr area, but that's not necessarily required. How about the oil yards? So Plötzlich, all of that seems to be above, quite comfortably above 50% damage actually, so don't think we need to target that. How about vehicles then? Going into the secondary targets that we are developing. So Zwickau might be a good target. Pilsen, we haven't really targeted that. Stuttgart and Brandenburg. Nuremberg. Yeah, I'm thinking Zwickau is probably a good target. So that should be around here somewhere. Where exactly Zwickau? There we go. Yeah, they do have a lot of flak here since we have been bombing that in the past, of course. But let's see about that. Okay, so let's take the air units here. And let's take the 8th Air Force. You guys have probably lost a lot of units here. Or, well, not lost them, but these guys are set to rest probably because they did take too much damage. So let's be a little bit mindful about that. And ask these guys here then to bomb Zwickau. Is there any other target in the vicinity that we want to attack? No, there's Chemnitz, but that does seem to be a small yard. Jena is maybe a good one. There's Zeitz, which does have some synthetic fuel refineries, and the issue is if we are going to attack that, we'd be probably suffering from a lot more flak than we necessarily need to. And they did take a lot of damage already, so we didn't really need to take that out, I believe. How about Plauen? Oh, that's interesting. Now that is an interesting target here. They've got Panzer IV yards, but they also got Jagdpanzer yards here. So lots of military targets, which is interesting. So what happens if we extend this here to an area of 2? Well, that would include Zeitz, but if we include as target priorities only the truck production as a primary target and then the tanks down here in Plauen as a secondary target, that I think is going to be fine. We don't need to send out more than 3 missions per day, simply because we have 3 targets. There's the production here. Ooh, now there are a couple of more, right? Yeah. Yeah, there's the truck production in Zwickau is what we want to target. But there are also at least the SDK Z251 self-propelled flak gun. And then there are these 2 or 3 targets down here in Plauen. So I think 4 guys here are going to be fine. We're going to remove all air groups so that we basically flash out these guys who are not flying anyway. Except the fighters. I think most of the fighters will be flying. We just need to make sure that the you guys are just not capable of reaching here due to the escort situation. Let's look at the AA situation too, because I think potentially there is going to be some issue here. So let's briefly check that out. So these are areas down here, Erfurt. We don't necessarily want to fly by Erfurt, but it's not the greatest threat either. It's just 3 high altitude AA. But Kassel does have some better AA. So, and then we are nearly flying across the Ruhr here, which is of course going to be super heavily involved in flak. So let's shift these attacks slightly, or the way here. So I don't think we need to be too concerned about Erfurt. Right, I did overlook a couple of these waypoints here. But yeah, we basically can fly sort of through here. I think that should neatly weave through all of this area. Then again, we don't want to directly pass over Kassel. Nordhausen is going to be okay. You know what, let's actually move that over here. So we're just passing by that, but not immediately going through the attacks. That's fine, and then probably we'll not go through the Munster-Osnabrück gap here, which we're flying most of the time through. And if this was a human opponent, I would be slightly worried about this gap here, but yeah, this way I think we're going to be alright. So, yeah, these guys are flying over here now. They've got 500 planes, which honestly isn't the most. So that does mean that probably we can really think about whether we do need the Liberators here to be doing a separate bombing mission. Since most of the targets seem to be fine, we could have, of course, tried to target Pilsen, but I think you would be alright if we... Yeah, you know what, actually Pilsen might be an interesting target. They do have quite a bit of truck production here. We haven't been really striking that before. So what happens if I do ask you guys to come down here? Well, that's an interesting plan here. So, well, firstly I probably want you to pass through the Münster-Rosenberg gap as well. And then probably north of Kassel. And sort of pass through here. Now that does mean you'll be exposed to fighter interception for quite a little while over here. You don't want to pass you through via Zeitz though, so that's a heavy AA situation there. Right, so you could actually make it down here, and that would be a very interesting idea now, wouldn't it? You're blinking because you can't find any target, but if we do strike vehicles, that should be fine. Any other target in the vicinity? Well, Prague is interesting. There's also vehicle production there and Marder 3 production. And Aufklärungspanzer. And the Grille. That might be a target that we at some point need to visit. But with relatively few bombers here, I think we're going to be alright doing this. Except, you know, we're not, because all of our escort planes, all of them are set to rest. And that's basically because we're flying at the excuse me, at the edge of the abilities of these guys here. So let's actually unassign you, let's actually unassign you. That's going to be alright. So basically these guys are not going to fly anymore. We can just focus on the missions that are going to be executed. But that does mean we can assign all of these Liberators here to be part of this strike here as well. And that's 1,000 bombers, and that is perfectly fine because I think that is going to be a good amount to saturate the enemy here. Right, let's ask you to look over the area that we're actually interested in. Yeah, no, that's fine, Zwickau. And I do want you to look at vehicles, yes, and tanks. Thank you. Good. What are you actually flying? A couple of Lightnings. You're not flying for whatever reason. Yeah, you're set to rest. Everyone here is set to rest. That's fine. Yeah, but basically we've got now 1,000 planes here flying to Zwickau. We don't need to be too concerned about the Strat recon, but you know what, let's actually make sure that you're not going to take the worst of the flak here. Like such. I think that's fine. Good, and you know what, I'm going to set up everything else here off camera, but I just did want to give you a taste here of how that looks, and you guys can rejoin me in a couple of seconds, which probably for me is going to take a couple of hours. And here we are back again. So I did set up all of the air directives. Let's go through them just one by one very quickly. I think doesn't need to be too long. So we've well, pretty much the ground support as we usually do down here in Italy, so that we can fight against these guys. In terms of direct ground attacks, we are using our fighter bombers here to basically attack the front line down here, because we probably want to advance on Venice a little bit. We're also going to take our medium bombers to directly attack Venice itself, because, well, they do have quite a bit of defensive power over here at all. So we are going to send out, well, right around 290 B-26s to basically pound these guys down here. We're also going to have an attack here on the port of Bastia and the, well, pretty much the units down here, so that hopefully we can dislodge these guys from the island of Corsica and get rid of them over time there. So these are basically the only ground attack missions that we've got. I don't think we've got anything over here in Northern Europe, but of course we are doing some city attacks, and this is pretty much the attack on Zwickau that we did discuss last time, Zwickau Plauen here. Now we've got Bomber Command doing some night attacks here in Kassel, and pretty much a very broad attack here on various different targets, most importantly the heavy tank factories down there. There are some, let's look at that, there are some Tiger and King Tiger production plants down here that we do want to reduce a little bit further. So let's try to attack these. That is going to be the job of RAF, of the RAF there, that's fine. And then we're going to do some, technically they're called Bomb City missions, but I think mostly they're fine. These guys are going to try to wreck some of the truck production in Antwerp and Eindhoven, so that's going to be fine. And then we've got our tactical air forces here in England trying to pound the rail yards in Picardy, Normandy, and slightly south of that. So that's basically what these guys are doing. Not that much going on there other than that. And we've got a couple of air superiority missions here trying to help out on some of our guys. And that is basically it. No, not quite. We've got one naval patrol. Because I don't think we're going to get Venice this time around, I still want to isolate them technically. So let's try to mine these waters and make sure that there's no Axis shipping that is going to come through there. Let's execute these air directives, see what is going to happen. And then we can go to the ground phase and see whether we can make any push there in Italy. Of course, I'm extremely happy about the, let's call that, nearly 3 divisions that we did encircle there, and I'm very happy about the result in the Lombardy region, which basically the Germans did completely evacuate. So that's definitely interesting to see. We are taking quite a couple of losses here, but look at the losses here in air combat. They are losing 180 planes in air combat. We've lost 40 so far, so yeah, I really think that we are exhausting the German pilot pool quite strongly. So that's nice to see. Although we're taking quite a couple of operational losses, which is always kind of a thing. Oh, I did forget one thing, and that is the 15th Air Force. Now, these guys, I did for once not send out to attack any specific city itself, but we did send them out over the Alpine region into pretty much the area of Innsbruck, Bolzano and Bad Gastein. Oh, you actually did attack Udine, I did not expect that. To basically attack the rail yards over here. So these are all of the rail yards in the Alpine region. So we should see that. Can we see that over here? Well, basically, if you look at the German situation here, and let's look at the supply depots that they've got. So suppose we can break through here and capture all of this region. So that does mean the Germans have a chance of digging into the Dolomite region over here. And we would be very hard pressed to push through the Alps into southern Germany. I don't think that is something that we want to do. But that being said, they only have 2 supply depots. One of them is in Bolzano, so southern Tyrol, the German-speaking region of Italy, and the other one is in Innsbruck, which is a major centre in sort of the northern Alpine region here, close to Germany, actually close to Bavaria. But these 2 rail yards, we did try to basically wreck over here, and since we did cover all of that, and since there's not that many things that need to be targeted here, we did also target the heavy industry here in Bad Gastein, 98% damage there, and the little heavy industry here in some of these other places. And I do think actually Udine was hit as well in the Friuli region of Italy. Right, so that being said, and that was that. How did you guys fare? Well, you did shoot down quite a large number here of German planes, and that is very, very lovely to see. 38 German planes, Bf-109s. Air loss 24. Yeah, these guys are starting to lose experience, and as they are losing experience, they are being killed. And that does actually increase our experience, so that's very nice to see. And let's just briefly check on how all of these guys fared. So Fighter Command, yeah, you're just doing some shooting down of enemy planes as they're landing, that's fine. Bomber Command, so the Brits not doing spectacularly well over here, 40 losses against 20 Germans. Not even 20 Germans. But nevertheless, you did do some damage here against the Tiger factory, which is lovely to see, and some misc damage against all of these other things. But yeah, really the Tiger factory did take the brunt of the damage here. So that's okay, I think that's going to be alright. You did at least fulfill your mission there, so that's okay. Right, no real losses for 2nd RAF, but did you do well actually what I asked you to do? Just a couple of attacks here on the rail yard, but that seems to be fairly successful. 8th Air Force, how are you guys doing? Losing about 40 planes, 90 of the Germans, so that's lovely to see. And actually the truck production being completely obliterated here, as is the Jagdpanzer production, and as is the Panzer IV production. So the Americans reliable as always, very lovely to see. Ninth Air Force, you did lose a couple of planes. Probably not against any actual Air Force, but yeah, pretty much doing some damage here on various rail yards and Picardy, so that's lovely to see. You guys did fare well, that's nice. Yeah. So lots of fighting here over the Alps actually. That's interesting to see. We're losing 40 planes, they're using 65, but it's okay. Yeah, and everything else is more or less fine. Bomber Command taking some casualties in these bombardments. And Tactical Air Command, you guys are taking surprisingly little in terms of casualties here. Even though you're coming in at a very low altitude, you're mostly running interdiction. I did tell you to attack the units actually. Interesting that you didn't. Nevertheless, that's fine. I do think that's pretty nice. Let's do look at the enemy hexes because I want to find out. So you guys here should be considered isolated and we can clear you out. You guys here are not yet considered isolated, so we do need to be a little bit more careful here. These guys up over here are suffering from some supply issues, so I want to press against them. But let's talk about this area here of Lombardy and Piedmont. So there's one important rule change that is going to happen once we've captured Milan. And that is because Milan, if you look at this thing over here, it has this little star, and that does mean it's a national supply source. And as soon as the Allies capture a national supply source off the Axis, there's Milan, I do think there's Frankfurt. No, yeah, Frankfurt, Duisburg and Berlin and Prague. So they've got a couple of these centers. And as soon as we've captured one of them, I understand the rules will change a little bit. One thing is, if we're destroying a German unit, it will not reappear in the game. Currently, what we're seeing is German units that we have killed, and they are getting re-established, of course without any men, so they do need to be filled up. But as a unit, they are still around. Once Milan is captured, if we're killing a unit, it will not be re-established. That does have good things and bad things about it. So, firstly, it does mean we're not going to meet that unit, so it's nice that the Germans are going to be going to have less of a combat to deal with us. So that's good. The bad thing, though, is it is not going to drain their reinforcements either. So I do actually like that the Germans have quite a couple of these, let's say, empty units, these paper units, that still need to be fitted out with equipment that they do need to get still, and that still needs to be produced, because we are reducing their capability to produce stuff. So in a way, I do like to have these guys. They are draining reinforcements that could otherwise flow into elite units, and I would rather like to fight a lot of weak units rather than a couple of elite German units that are going to cause a lot of supply issues going to cause a lot of issues for us. So, pros and cons about that. The second thing is much more strongly a con versus for us, and that is, as soon as we capture Milan, all of the frozen German units will be freed up to move. So currently the Germans do have a couple of units that I think are locked into place. I don't know specifically, but I suppose that, for example, this one here, the 413th Static Division in Nuremberg, this cannot currently move, and we are currently free to not engage that. And that is going to change as soon as we capture Milan. Now that's quite a couple of divisions that the Germans have scattered about, which I suspect at least are currently locked. And that does mean we're going to meet a lot more opposition once that we are capturing Milan. So let's keep that in mind. Now I don't want to be too gamey. I do think we need to capture Milan when we can. It's basically not an option to basically encircle that and not do anything about it. So yeah, I think we're going to try to capture it, but at least let's try to be aware of these issues before they're coming up. Right, that being said, I think we can move up over here towards some of these regions, most certainly. Let's try to capture some of these depots. Let's do at least get close to Genoa, and even though I don't think we can capture it yet, but at least we're certainly going to get closer to that. You guys are kind of weak actually in moving about over here. Yeah, but I do think it doesn't matter too much, because once we are capturing these areas here, we're going to be a little bit better off. Now, you guys, yeah, I think I probably want to move you up over here, don't I? Yeah, well, let's try to move you. Why can you move so badly forward? Is there some heavy mod or something around here? Don't see any. But yeah, we are going to push forward here. And I do think that does make some sense. You're the second call. Let's move you up to here. Well, you guys are just headquarter units here. I probably should guard you a little bit better. Yeah, let's at least move these guys over there as well. Right, you guys, can you really not move up any further? Well, okay, let's get you over there. Right, so that's fine. All of you guys are fine. And then we have a more strategic decision to formulate, and that is, what are we gonna do in the long term? Now, I did talk a little bit in the beginning of the episode, I think, about the importance of Marseille as a level 9 port, which does have some real capabilities to ease the supply issue in France. But on the other hand, well, firstly there are a couple of mountains, but I think that's not a big issue. We can bypass them here on the south, on the Côte d'Azur. We can also try to push through this valley here. I don't necessarily think we want to push through these mountains themselves. I don't think we want to push through the Alps themselves, at least if the Germans can formulate a defensive plan there. But what we could potentially do is try to push through this area here. I don't think that's technically considered the Po Valley anymore, but sort of the Veneto and Friuli regions. Hook around Slovenia and try to get into Lower Austria, into the region of Vienna. I mean, Vienna itself would be a very tempting target. There's also the Vienna Neustadt, which is a major production center of aircraft, which we're not so concerned about, but still they are producing more than 100 aircraft here per week, so that is an issue. And there's a lot of oil production in Vienna itself, so these would be tempting targets to hook around here and try to get there. The issue I have with that is it's such an open terrain, which is going to be very lively for our tanks, but it also means we've very few places to formulate a good defensive layer and protect our flanks. So our flanks would be incredibly exposed towards the east and southeast over here, because there's basically nothing that we can hook our line into, and we would need a lot of units here to make that viable, or hope that the Germans are not going to defend in that way at all, which there's something to be said about that, because the supply routes here don't necessarily allow for massive German build-up, but it still could be quite complicated, so I'm not sure just how much I like that idea. That being said, it's probably the easiest way that we can directly carry the fight to the Germans here by hooking around, like here, into Vienna, and then we can actually from that point on threaten Prague and Munich and potentially bring up the front line through the Alps. I don't know which is going to be better. Probably we're going to split the difference and we're going to send some troops over here and some troops over there. I do think the Americans did encourage a much more direct attack plan on the Germans historically, so these guys might be sent up that way, whereas the British did go for more of an let's strike at their weakest point philosophy, and certainly all of the French lines, French units that we have would certainly try to get into France and liberate parts of France. So I think it's going to be fair to move in that direction anyway. We do want to protect our flanks here, but just how much we can move up over here, I don't know. It's going to take a couple of weeks anyway, and at that point we're also going to have an assessment about just how effective we're going to be landing in Picardy, and that might encourage us to drive up here more or less. Whereas probably we need to see just how the Germans are going to react over here. So it's a little bit open to debate exactly what we're going to do, but the first thing to concentrate on, I think, is clearing out a couple of these German units and driving on Milan. I think the first decision that we actually want to make, and that's slightly gaming perspective, is okay, can you actually move here? Yeah, you can. You could potentially move into Milan. So do we want to clear out Milan first and get rid of all of these units here for good? They're not going to come back. Or do we want to, in fact, get these guys into the German reserve pool and make sure that they are going to drain more supplies from the Germans? I don't know. Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. And next time we're going to see the ground phase of this week's turn. Thank you very much for watching. Hope to see you around then. Bye bye, guys.